it really stuck out this weekend without Fred. Just seeing the offense struggle, right? Like the win on Saturday against Detroit, Pascal really just had to carry them
Oh, yeah.
on the offensive end, and that got them barely a victory in Detroit. Which at this point in the season, take the wins, man.
Yeah.
I really don't care. I mean, I care a little bit how it looks, but
No, that was like
win's a win.
That was a really gritty performance. And yeah, offensively, you didn't really see much. And I think that's been the pattern here. Like, I didn't think offensively they showed a great showing against the Pelicans. If anything, it was just Jakob Poeltl had every putback in the world, and that carried their fourth quarter scoring. We saw the Detroit game was very ugly. They were at, I think, 95 points. I saw a stat from John Schumann online that was like the second lowest effective field goal percentage for a win this season from any team.
Raptors just be out here setting records, man. I love it.
Yeah, it's like that's such a nasty record to have of like the second lowest effective field goal percentage in a win. I'm truly curious to see who else actually had the first one. And then last night they only scored 93 points, and meanwhile, like, Cleveland was just sort of throwing the ball into the ocean. It was so easy for them, right? And I think that what it really comes down to is just like you don't really have depth in terms of that skill set. Obviously, you miss Fred, right? And you have here in the notes, what's Fred averaging in February?
Yeah, Fred's averaging over 22 points. The 7.4 assists, I think, is key too, in terms of the playmaking. And he's making over 3 threes per game. And, in the last 3 games without Fred, the Raptors haven't made double-digit three-pointers. 9 of 31 against New Orleans, 7 of 26 against Detroit, 9 of 25 from Cleveland. And we've seen this across the whole season. Like, the three-point shooting has just been a huge issue, and they've had to battle to win these games. But especially when Fred is out, and especially when guys like OG and even Gary are struggling, like, you just really have nothing from the perimeter.
Yeah, and that goes to the team building philosophy, right? Like, they haven't really stacked up on guard skills on the roster, right? At some point, I was watching the game and I was like, wow, like, Garland is running the offense really, really well. And he's pairing so well with these bigs and essentially just spoon feeding these guys, right? And I'm watching Mitchell, and I'm like, this guy can score at all 3 levels. You gotta give him the ball, get out of the way, or he can play within the team scheme. He's able to get out in transition. He's just looking great in general. And then meanwhile, the other side, the Raptors are running post-ups for Chris Boucher and pick and roll for Jeff Dowtin. And I'm just like, okay, well, this is not going to go well if that is how this game is going to be played. I think specific to the point about the guard depth, I mean, look, so when Fred is out of the game, right, the concerns that I have are sort of, can the Raptors get a good shot? Can the Raptors run their offense? And also, who can knock down some threes? More than anything else, that's my biggest concerns, right? And when you look at it, Fred is second on the team in drives per game, right? The Raptors, so much of their offense is drive, touch the paint, kick it out, start the momentum, and then make something happen out of that momentum, right? Fred drives the ball 14 times a game. He shoots 42% on those drives, which, it doesn't sound that great, but honestly, when you look across the board, a lot of the Raptors are shooting under 40% on drives, but still 42%. 1.5 free throws per game out of his drives. He makes those at 96%. He gets 2 assists per game on his drives. He has the highest assist percentage on the team in terms of off his drives, and he passes the most often out of his drives at 58% of his drives. And in terms of turning the ball over and protecting the ball, he only turns it over on 4% of his drives. So, like, there is a really good and not just, I would say it's good, but it's also high volume, right? And I think for the volume in this case is very important, because it's one thing if you have lots of guards in the team and Fred's driving 14 times and doing this, I'd be like, okay, well, maybe we could spread it out a little bit. When you see him out of the lineup, who's having to drive more? It's Scotty having to drive more. It's Gary having to drive more. It's Jeff Dowtin getting a chance to drive the ball more. And in the last 3 games without Fred in the lineup, Scotty has driven the ball 39 times. He has shot 5 of 19 on those drives. He has no free throw attempts on those drives. He has 2 assists and 3 turnovers on those drives, right? So 5 of 19, no free throws, 2 assists, 3 turnovers.
Yeah, not great.
Gary Trent, I like that he's driving the ball more, right, as an approach. But, again, the results haven't been there, and that's why the offense has been a little ugly. Gary has driven the ball 15 times in those 3 games. He shot 3 of 11 from the field. He has 1 assist and 1 turnover. And then Jeff Dowtin has driven the ball 14 times. He's actually 4 of 9 from the field, which is decent, but he doesn't have an assist, and he has 1 turnover as well. So it's like Pascal's still able to play his game, and I feel like that hasn't even been impacted all that much. But at the same time, it's just like that extra slack. Who else is going to pick up those reps that hasn't really been there for the team. And then, of course, in terms of the three-point shots, we just know that there's just not enough three-point shooting on the Raptors. Like, yes, Pascal can, increase his three-point volume, and he's been shooting it decently. He hit 4 of 9 last night. That's pretty good. Scotty's shooting the three a little bit more as well. You saw Nick Nurse encouraging guys, OG, to fire away. OG, in his case, I just think he's overall really rusty. So I'm not really holding it against him. But overall, like, the Raptors have made, as you mentioned, 9, 7, and 9 threes. And on the season, the Raptors have only won 34% of their games making single-digit three-pointers. So, yeah, I think it's you don't have anyone on the roster to replace Fred in terms of what he does. Maybe guys can grow into that eventually, but that's probably going to be more of a long-term thing. And I think, yeah, if you want to not have such a sharp drop-off in terms of not having the guys sort of pick up some of these added reps, you would actually need to add more depth at the position. But we've been saying this for like 2 years now.
Yeah, and that's going to be, again, big question going into the off season, right? Like, if you're not going to meet whatever Fred's contract demands are, like, that's a huge hole that they're going to have to plug in, especially because, like you said, there just isn't anybody on the roster right now that can step into that starting point guard role or step into the role where they have Fred's skill set.
Yeah, and that's where I think that, there's been so much discussion on the show this year and also just in lots of online spaces about, like, okay, we move on from Fred, right? I mean, if you've been anywhere online and covering and following the Raptors, you have seen this as a very prevalent sort of idea. But I think it's not just you move on from him. If you want to move on from him, it's who do you replace him with? Because you can't just give him nothing else in return for him. If he walks in free agency, for example, you need to sign and trade at the minimum because of the fact that you just don't have that added level of skill sets on the roster. And listen, maybe you want to build and open up that space and you want to let the other guys step into it. That's fine. But I do think that then you would have to really accept a transition period where the Raptors become a team where they consistently struggle to score 100 points. And what's the appetite for that?